All right, what's up, and welcome to episode 2 of the Temporal Eternal podcast. We are so stoked that you decided to listen to us again, or maybe this is your first time. Our first episode was this us sharing kind of our hearts and the vision and the goal of this podcast. And really, it's all about eternity, right? That there's a lot of awesome things on this life that we call here on earth, but that our eternity that God has set before us needs to be in the front of our mind, right? It needs to be a piece of a focus of everything that we do, right? Because if I am keeping the eternity in front of me, then that also helps me make decisions here on earth. So today we are going to be discussing distractions, right? And how to recognize
Hmm.
distractions. And some distractions, right, aren't
Squirrel.
totally like terrible things, right? So yeah, exactly. I'm definitely like that. I get distracted, just like Matt was saying with with that sort of thing. But some distractions aren't like, okay, these aren't bad things, but in excess, or if these things began to be a place that gets put before your relationship with Jesus or the calling God has had for your life. If God says, "Hey, I'm calling you to do this," but then you continue to be distracted by doing this, listening to this, watching this, well, then maybe that's something that needs to be addressed, right? In some cases, it might be, completely taking something out, but in some cases, it's just going, okay, like, let me take a look at it. So I would love to hear from, either you, Matt, or Brennan first. Man, what is one thing that you would say has been a distraction in your life, whether right now or in the past? What is one distraction, whether it's a big one or a small one?
Uh-oh. I lost myself. I don't know what happened to me.
This is a great example of distractions here, as Matt's mic just went out. Brennan, while Matt's looking at his camera, and we will not. This is a test. This is testing everybody in distractions here. Brennan, why don't you talk first? What would you say are some
Yeah.
distractions that you have faced? There he is. Look, that was good, man. Keep people on their
Welcome
toes.
back.
Welcome back. So yeah, Brennan, what would you say?
I would say for me, I think I'll go one kind of like outward one and one inward one. The outward one I would say would definitely be screen time on my phone. And as a youth pastor, I always ring that bell of like, hey, like, try and make sure you're filtering what's coming in and time spent and things like that. But I know how much I know I need to actually truly do that in my own life. So whether it's social media, YouTube, whatever it is, I'd be probably embarrassed even this week, even trying to focus on this idea of like what are distractions, to look back on my screen time and be like, okay, how much time am I wasting, honestly, like just flipping through my phone. Um, and that can be so distracting, I think, and is such a prevalent thing for so many of us, just because our phones are with us all the time. We have notifications all the time, so whether it's at work or it's in life, and I think the big key thing here is like just time, because time spent doing one thing is taking away from another. And so if that's time that maybe I'm too focused on just like mindlessly watching something or going through something, that I could really be investing in my walk with God, or investing in other people, or investing in
Mm.
different things that He's called me to do. I think that's a big deal. And then I would say the inward one, this is a little bit different maybe, but a distraction I think definitely can uh, be something that I know I struggle with and have had to kind of work on, is comparison, and like a distraction of
Mm.
comparing myself to other people. And so I think that one, it pulls away from who God has called me to be. And that sometimes I think maybe allows these thoughts of different things of like, okay, if someone else is doing it, why would I even do it? And it becomes a distraction so much that it might even shut me down from trying to go and do other things. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think something inwardly it can be a distraction, definitely is. And maybe if you're listening, you can relate to this, is just that idea of comparison. I see somebody else do it, something that maybe God has put on my heart, or I desire to do, or feel like is a gift and God has called me to do, but someone else might be doing it so much better. Why would I even try? And so I think letting those things speak to us as a distraction can really get in the way. So yeah, I'd start there for
Mhm.
myself. Yeah,
It's
man.
really good.
For yourself, that's a good point. My distraction was myself.
Like,
Mm.
I was so concentrated on trying to fix myself other than fixing it through God. And that was my biggest problem. Like, huge problem. I'm like always trying to figure out, why am I not fixing myself? I'm trying to fix myself, trying to fix myself, trying to fix myself my own way. But and I was never trying to fix it the way God wanted me to do it, and that was a distraction from my concentration with God.
Mm.
And I was trying to figure out how I could do it, but I was, I mean, I was Googling things, trying to figure things out on my own. And that was just a distraction from my relationship with God. And that really messed things up in my life because I found different things, found different concentrations. Then that even those turned into distractions. So I mean, I started my business, which I'm not saying that's a distraction, but it is a distraction because it takes time away from God when I should be putting it towards God instead of my business. I take way more time towards my business than I put towards God. So I started turning that around. And once I saw that, that really shifted everything for me. And that made life so much easier. And He provided for my business, not just for myself, but for my business, helped me support different things. And I mean, being able to do a podcast like this, I wouldn't be able to do it unless I had that different shift.
It's fascinating how we can try to fix things in us and do all these things, and it's all about do, right? And really the only way that true transformation happens is, like you're saying, Matt, is just stopping and being in the presence of God, and that through our relationship with Jesus, the transformation occurs, right? I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, there are daily disciplines. There's some truths and even biblical principles to it, but overall, true transformation comes out of the abundance of our relationship with Jesus. That's really good. Good.
Yeah. It's up to you. What
Um,
about you, Donald?
yeah, so a couple come to mind. And this is, again, I don't want anybody to like check out as soon as I say this, but this is for me in my particular situation. Video games was a big thing. I loved playing Xbox One, and I'm not against video games at all. And I'll, maybe if I go to a family member's house, maybe play it for a couple minutes or something like that. I'll have, a few little apps on my phone, but for the most part, I had a video game system, and it was a distraction from me. It was actually an escape. And, when I was dealing with the stress of life or ministry or finances or whatever it may be, it would be escapism. And I would stay up late and play video games. And then I'd be exhausted the next day, and I wouldn't be able to give my best to the work God had called me to do. I wouldn't be able to give my best to part of my calling, which is to be a husband and a father. And so for me, that was a distraction that I tried adjusting margins and different things like that. And that was one actually I had a complete cutout. I said, okay, I'm going to get rid of the Xbox.
So you
And I haven't looked
completely
back.
cut it out.
And I had to, like, in that situation for me, I had to completely remove that. So like I said, I'll play a few minutes on my phone or something, but I had, because in that situation, I couldn't just do it for a few minutes. Like, I had to play for a couple hours, and it was beginning to be too much. And I think the other one, just real quick, before we kind of move on to our next question, is busyness. I think busyness has been one of the biggest distractions in my life. I think it's one that a lot of people maybe listening today can resonate with. Uh, Culture shows that busyness is successful, that I'm having my kids in all these extracurricular activities. I'm volunteering or doing all these groups or working all these, different things in my career or my job, or part of all of these friendship engagements, right? Hanging out here, doing this, doing that, being active on social media, whatever it may be. It could be a plethora of things. But regardless, busyness has definitely been a distraction for me, because what I allowed to happen is my fulfillment and my identity uh, was placed in busyness, was placed in what I was able to accomplish. and instead of just being God's son, instead of being a child of God. And so that was one that definitely was it for me. Um, so yeah, so I
That's
mean, I
good.
think,
That's good. I mean,
y-
just thinking about that, it's just huge busyness, huge.
yeah,
And I think that kind of
it's
relates back to even like a little bit of that idea of like, you know, kind of the mentality within culture is like continuing to do things that are going to get you to the next level and get you to press forward. And I'm not saying that's bad or like that shouldn't be a focus in our life to continue to succeed or progress in life. But like you guys are saying, it just sometimes becomes so all consuming that our focus is on, I got to get to the next thing, I got to finish this task to get to the next place, that it's going to lead us to a place of burnout, and I'm guilty of it myself. And like I said before, it's like the time, it's like we are limited in our time, and I think we overdo it so many of the times within work and life and things we're trying to even pursue. And it's like, wait a second, have we replaced that busyness and trying to get ahead so much that we actually could be running right over what God is trying to speak and do right in that moment? And I agree completely with what you guys are saying, that happens to me. I'm like, wait, I gotta take a break. One, I gotta do a heart check and see like, all right, God, where am I at with you? Have I kind of tuned you in? Have I brought you into the situation? Because He's there the whole time. It's whether I'm willing to focus on Him above the busyness in my life. So yeah, absolutely, that's definitely, I think, something that is pressing, and it's hard to sometimes not fall into a pattern of that. So
yeah, no, that's it's a common one, especially now. So um, it really is.
yeah.
So as we're talking about distractions, I think the next question or topic I really want to cover is, okay, so yes, we know there's many different distractions in life, and in some cases, right, um, they can be more serious than others. But how do we discern? Like, okay, so how do we
Hmm.
figure out? How do we recognize what those distractions are? So if we have some people listening today, right, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or watching on YouTube, where wherever you're listening in or watching in today, um, what can we tell them about the different ways that you can figure out what might be a distraction?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it starts off with that's a great question, because I think that as much as we can say this message and have this heart of doing like a self inventory, I think every one of us is good and bad at that. But I think it starts there, is evaluating in your life. Okay, what is taking up your time and your focus, and is that adding value to your life, or is it taking away? And it seems simple. It's very easy to say, but I think when we realistically can try and go through that, it's like, wow, okay, I maybe have to work on this, or I have to cut certain things out. Like Donald, I commend you on that. It's like video games was something that took so much of your time, in certain aspects of your life, and you're like, okay, I just got to cut it out. And that's the hardest decision for people, I think, to make. Whether it's something that, yeah, it's not necessarily negative, but it's just taking up your time, or maybe it is something like a really big struggle in our life we're dealing with, that we say, man, I gotta cut this out in order to get away from it. But yeah, I think self-awareness is a huge thing, and we gotta at least start there. I know, at least for myself, I gotta look at that and say, okay, I need to kind of take an inventory of myself and what I'm focusing on. So
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
How
good.
about you, Matt?
Yeah, so my thing is you got to figure out what is going on in your brain when that activity is happening. So, are you trying to figure out how this is helping you reach others to make them go to heaven? Are you trying to be a disciple that way? So, maybe when Donald, were you playing Xbox by yourself? Were you playing with friends? Were you being a witness to those people? So that's the way I look at it sometimes as well. Like if I'm sitting there watching Netflix or something, how is that going to help me go to heaven?
It's really good. What's the root, right?
Right. So are you doing something to help yourself eternally or temporary? So
That's really good. I mean, I mean, and there's also like we can also justify, right? Like, because I could totally be like on the other end, I could be like, yeah, I'm evangelizing right now in video, which there are people out there, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing. But for me, it would be maybe just working it. But I think that's spot on. I mean, I think about just different situations and like and don't get me wrong too, like, and I think at the end we'll kind of touch on this last point. Like I'm not anti Netflix. I just watched the Disney Plus movie the other day. You know what I'm saying? Like I do believe that we need to be mindful of the things that we are exposing ourselves to and watching and all those things like that.
But
That
how
being
much time
said,
is it
no, that's
taking? That's the question.
correct. Correct. And I also, so not only like the time, but also like the root of it. Like, and that kind of goes back to in my situation with video games is escapism. Is escapism bad? Maybe a small piece. Okay, take a break, take a breather. But are you not dealing with the realities of life? When you deal with stress, and you're dealing with crisis, and you're dealing with all these things, are you laying them at the feet of your television, or are you laying them at the feet
Mm,
of the throne of God? So
yeah,
that's kind of exactly, what
So
you were
good.
saying, Matt, is where are we at? Because so many times for me, I would de-stress instead of bringing the stress to Jesus, laying it at his feet and having a peace that surpasses all understanding come over me. And then after, yeah, maybe I'll go chill and take a break because it's been crazy. But it is, what is the cause of dealing with that? So I think the looking at the root is spot on. I would say, of course, spiritual discernment, right? Like, as you spend time with God, right? Like search my heart, oh God, like that Psalm of David, right? Like examine me, ask those prayers, look at the word of God and see what the word of God says towards these things. I think accountability also is a big thing. If you have a leader or a friend in your life that you have a honest, transparent relationship with, that they can ask you questions, that they can be like, hey, how you doing this, that you have given them the open door to speak into your life. That's another way. So yeah, I mean, I think those are several different ways, like you guys are saying, about both through prayer, through the church, the body of Christ, through looking at the root and the cause of it, um, to recognize what those distract. And for everybody, it's different, right? I mean,
yeah,
for some people, it looks different than others, and there is plenty of people that live for God and play video games, and I'm like, that's awesome. Like I'm not completely anti, but for me in my personal life, I just had to do it, right? It was too much of an excess.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
and I
that's
think that yeah, like you said, I think that hits the nail on the head. Is like it's a balance for every single one of us, and sometimes I feel like myself, I even overuse that word, but it truly is something that is very practical. Is like, what is the balance of taking the time and resting, like doing those things that are fulfilling and resting, but they're not so cumbersome, or taking up so much time in your life that it is distracting you away from the things that you're called to do in life, right? And so it's like it's a careful balance, and it's like as we kind of look at that and evaluate that, I think as you shared, Donald, it's like, okay, keeping accountable to yourself, to other people, and actually challenging ourselves to grow a little bit. It's like a workout for our lives. Is like, if we're never going to actually put the work in to try and better ourselves in it, we're going to produce nothing if we're not going to evaluate what the root of the problem is or be honest with ourselves, because that's the hardest part, I think, is admitting that either it's a problem or it's something that's overtaking too much of our life. And so we have to kind of evaluate it in that way and say, okay, where is that healthy balance of things, and is it, like Matt said, adding or taking away to what God has called us to do?
good. I think even go along with that, and this is kind of where we'll wrap up our last point or even question I'll ask you both is, so for those who are, I believe when you hear these kind of conversations, right, whether it's a podcast, a sermon, a clip on social media, a lot of times, there's many times where you need to go, okay, I'm going to examine myself and I'm going to really start thinking about this. But a lot of times when I hear these topics, I already know, right? The Holy Spirit's already stirring in me things, right? Like I'm like, yeah, that's it. Yes, that's it. Oh, I know exactly what that distraction is. So here's what I'd like to ask. So once someone recognizes what the distraction is, how how do we address it? What is that process? What does that look like? I know it's probably, can be very fluid and different depending on the situation, but I'd love to hear kind of some personal experience and also some processes that you both do when, when you start to see, oh, this is becoming a distraction in my life.
Yeah. So I'll go first on that one. I have a special ability, I think, that God has blessed me with to just cut things out. There's things that I've always had problems with, but once I gave everything over to God, once I started living for him all the time, he gave me this ability just to snap the finger and I was done with it. So, it was more of me going all in before I got the ability to do that, because I changed my mindset when it came to it. So fixing my mindset to live for God was the thing that helped me fix it all. No matter what problem it was. Like if I wanted to stop playing, like I'd play Xbox too. I was playing hardcore 6-7 hours a night. I just stopped. Now, do I have another distraction? Sure, I might. I work on my business, but I can, if I need to, I can stop, go in my prayer closet, and just let God have it. And it's just the ability to like have that hunger for God. You gotta have a hunger for God, and I never had that until what I haven't had a hunger like I have now until like a year ago, and man, it lit me on fire, and ever since living for Him, and that's really helped me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that going off of that for me, Donna, I think you said it earlier too, and the importance is like realizing that sometimes we go into these things as an escape, uh, and to understand how do we address this and how do we truly deal with that. For me, I think it's understanding like within the distractions, like not only like why are they there, but why is it like something that I can go to so fast. And I think that starts for me to address these things is having realistic expectations in a couple different ways. Is that I have to have a realistic expectation of what is doable, whether that's feeling overwhelmed by things where you just kind of, so some of us do this where we're so overwhelmed by all of the things that we have to do and the responsibilities and feeling like we're up to par in our relationship with God, but it's not a competition, and so do we understand and have like a realistic expectation, knowing what God has said and who he's called us to be, and as he tells us that like we're not supposed to rely on our own strength, but truly to rely on him. And so I have to go back to that question, is like, do I rely on the Lord and like his strength for me to overcome some of these things? And then do I have realistic expectations? Like I said earlier, maybe it's that comparison idea of not trying to do too much, or having that place where it's like I'm not feeling burned out because I'm setting better expectations of, okay, if this doesn't get done, it's okay. But what is my plan to better fulfill my time, whether that's at work, and better expectations with my boss or whatever it be that is in that place, is okay with these distractions, again, following that suit of that self-evaluation and saying, okay, as I address this, what are the expectations here? How can I truly overcome them? Because if I shoot the bar too high, to overcome this, and I don't make it, then I'm just going to feel bad about myself, right? And so it's like, okay, how can I incrementally say, okay, I'm just going to take time to just either set up what my schedule looks like this week and say, okay, I got to make sure that these things don't get in the way, or I'm not replacing free time with a moment of I can just fall back into this, because sometimes it's like, okay, not that everything, some of us are built a little bit more freeform than regimented with our schedules, but I know that adding that structure in will help me not fall by the wayside and say, okay, I'm not going to focus on anything, or I'm not going to get anything done just because I get distracted by these other things. And so I think it's looking at what I need in my life, in my schedule, and be realistic about it. And then go back to that question of, okay, God, how can I rely on you to get these things done, so that I don't feel like I'm just wasting away in my distractions, but also not setting unrealistic expectations for my life, you know? So it comes back to that idea of balance. So yeah, I don't know if that relates to you guys in any way, but
No, for sure. When I think too, it's like, so for me, like I don't have that gift that Matt's talking about, right? Like I,
right,
like
yeah.
that's awesome. Like to me, so and I do think people have that ability in general, depending on different areas of their life, right? Like different types of distractions are easier for others to overcome than certain things. But so I think you're spot on too when you're saying, Brennan, about incremental, right? Because a lot of times, like and especially in the Christian world, you go to a church service or a conference, and you're like, "I'm ready now." You got that song. It's like it's all like it's it might be depending on which type of church, and we won't go into that. But like it might be very excitement, and emotion there, and those are great things, right? Those are
Hmm.
awesome things, but at the same time, we get so hyped up, and then all of a sudden we make a mistake and we just beat ourselves up, or we're like, oh man. And also, I think too, like, what do you? It's like fasting, right? Like the purpose of fasting isn't just to make a sacrifice to God; it's replacing what that was and replacing with more time with Jesus. And like, so I remember, like, when I stopped playing video games, my wife was just like, "Hey, you stop playing video games, but now you're in your phone on social media," right? So I I
Yeah,
I took
yeah, yeah,
at the beginning I took video games out, but then I replaced it with something else. So
exactly.
at the end of the day, it's the same thing. So
Yeah,
and I think too, when it comes to addressing it, I think it's just really having honest conversations with the Lord, having honest conversations with people that love you, that you can trust, and that especially that are believers, that kind of know where you're coming from there, and just to know, okay, what level is it, right? There have been some things where there's been some seasons of my life where I put a timer on my social media right on my phone, where I go, okay,
hmm,
I'm only spending this amount of minutes a day on it, because I just don't want it to get out of hand. Or there's some things like video games that I've completely cut it out. Or there's some things that I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that this is not an access. Like, is this a completely bad thing? No, but I need to make sure I just have a handle on it. So there's going to be a lot of different distractions that each and every one of us face, and some are really small, and some are much bigger, right? Some are much more serious. Some are affecting our ability to think clearly, or maybe some of them are something. It could be a person, a relationship that is distracting us from our identity, right?
yeah,
It could be a job, right? And again, some of these distractions, so the way to address these distractions is not always like take them out. Like, because I don't want anybody to be like, I'm breaking up with my boyfriend. No, I'm not saying that. You might need to, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, it's just what we have to do is we have to recognize that, so that we can have enough, as we heard earlier today, self awareness to go, okay, let me be aware of this so I don't let it get out of hand. Yes,
yeah,
there are some instances where there could be a distraction that you need to completely cut out of your life, whether that's a person, an environment, a mentality, an object, something that takes up your time, again, a thought process, like I was saying earlier with mentality, or it's just something that you got to go, okay, I know this is something I just have to be aware of, that like this is something that is okay. It's part of my day. Like I like social media because I can stay in touch with my friends and family, but I don't want to get so consumed with it that I
hmm,
forget who I am, and then I
yeah,
forget whose I am. So I think that's really the overall importance of really addressing distractions. But as we wrap up today, any final thoughts? No pressure if you have them or not. Brennan or Matt, but any final thoughts you have?
I got one. So, distractions is also good to have an accountability partner to help you keep away from those distractions. So, whether it's if you have a wife or a husband or a boyfriend or girlfriend or just a best friend, ask them to help you. If they are truly your friend, they're going to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true.
And I would say that God didn't create our lives to be a rat race, whether that is in calling or finances or life or even working through just challenges in our life. So I would say that for those of you listening, you might be like, all right, this is overwhelming to try and cut down on some of these things, and we maybe even beat ourselves up with, I'm not doing this enough, or I'm so distracted in life, or I've been distracted from really pursuing a walk with God. I'm here to say that hopefully this is an encouragement to you. Is just let's look at the things that are practical, but be intentional. When we're intentional, even in a small ways, that's going to help us grow further and grow better at actually addressing the distractions and help us focus on the things we're truly called to focus on. And so how can we be intentional with those things and start small and grow gradually from there? And I think that could go so much further sometimes. So yeah.
It's good. I mean, remember when we address the distractions, and many of them are temporal, many are temporary. When we hand those to God, he replaces those with his eternal mission, his purpose, his identity he has given you in him. And just know that every time God calls us to serve him, to hear what he has to say, to maybe surrender something, he usually brings something in return. And a lot of times when I've surrendered
Yeah.
things to God, I've received peace, I've received purpose, I've received fulfillment, I've received blessing, I've even received community. But yeah, that's it for today. We're so stoked that you decided to listen to the Temporal Eternal podcast. We're very excited for next week's podcast. We're going to be talking about the hero of the story and just what that really means, and the hero of your story and what your story should be like, and how you should look at living that out in your life here on earth to really live for eternity. So again, please hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube or Apple Podcast or Spotify. Make sure you hit subscribe so you get notifications of it. You can also go to our website, temporaleternal.com. Keep an eye out. We should have our apparel up soon. So keep checking on the website. And as soon as we have the apparel up, we'll have some cool shirts like this and other things like that. Just as neat reminders about it. And we will see y'all next week.